Hello, and welcome to the Healing Souls podcast. This is Natasha Helfer, and I am super excited to have my guest on today, Sarah Bridges from Massachusetts. She is the founder of Latch On, Latch Off, and runs a practice where she offers support to, I'm guessing, females primarily who after having a child, and both on lots of different kind of perspectives. So postpartum care, obviously infant feeding, sexuality, lots of different kinds of areas that have to do with what happens to you and your body and your experiences after having a baby. So I'm super excited to talk about that. I just want to briefly just mention that it is January 8th, 2021. And both Sarah and I just want to, I think, acknowledge that it's a difficult time right now in the United States of America. We've had a very difficult week, and we're not necessarily going to spend any time discussing the events per se, but just want to honor the fact that we're trying to have a conversation that has nothing to do with kind of our political climate in the context of a very upheaval political climate space. And I think we're both feeling the heaviness of that, as well as maybe many of our current listeners. You may be listening to this much later than January 8th, 2021, but that's just kind of context. So in that space, I just want to say welcome, Sarah, to the program. So glad to have you today.
Thank you so much.
All right, so why don't we just start off with giving you a chance to introduce yourself a little bit more than what I just did. Tell us a little bit about your background and how you come to this interest of yours in this field, and what drew you to this type of work, and what you're all about.
Sure. Yeah. I had a little baby 5 years ago, and that was the catalyst for this journey of becoming a certified lactation counselor. I've always been drawn to health, and I guess being a woman, like women's health. So I did get, before I had my little girl, I got an education and a degree in public health. And yeah, I was just blindsided by how painful breastfeeding was and how isolating it felt. And I felt like society and a lot of my friends didn't get it. And so it felt very lonely and daunting, and you're running on low sleep and your body has changed. So I think in movies and in my family, it just looked so easy and flawless and natural. And I was like, this is super hard, and I don't like breastfeeding. So, yeah, I guess the pain was a big motivation to just empower parents and help them with things that I didn't know when I was a new mom. And so a few years ago, I became a certified lactation counselor and joined a group practice in Kansas with Little Apple doulas. And then we recently moved to New England, so I moved my practice online and teach breastfeeding classes, and just started my own business called Latch On, Latch Off. And if anyone has ever breastfed, it's really hard to latch on and latch off. So that's why I named it that. But
I feel like my nipples are already like just
yeah, everyone listening, your nipples are gonna be really tingly in a bad way. Sorry.
I breastfed all four of my children and had like you know, and this is always something that I always have a lot of anger. That's how I deal with issues. My anger on misinformation or miseducation, or how did I not know this, or how did I go? You know, I'm a college educated, fairly privileged white, female that, took a lot, and here I am 27 years old. I wasn't even young, and so having my first baby, and how do I not know that there's thrush and yeast and my nipples bleeding, and I'm, like you're saying, out of my mind with lack of sleep. And in those moments, I have a lot of anger about how little sometimes we are taught about female anatomy, about reproduction, about our sexuality, about our anatomy. And it's just mind-boggling that, we go into these spaces so malinformed. And then,
Right.
and not just malinformed, but as you were talking about your story, I thought about the cultural pressures too, right? So just the decision whether or not a person wants to breastfeed or does not want to breastfeed comes with a lot of cultural messaging that is very kind of presented in moralistic ways, like you're either a
Mm-hmm.
good parent or a bad parent or a less than adequate parent or a supreme parent if you do these things in certain ways. Do you want to talk about that at all? Like, what are some of the messages that are out there that are typical that people are struggling with?
Yeah, I just felt like it was, I guess my whole mom life has been damned if you do, damned if you don't. And you have to really quickly learn, I guess, be secure enough to learn what's best for you and your family and become a recovering people pleaser really quickly. Um, but yeah, it is really difficult. And I always try to treat the parents I see with like a parent-centered approach. I was talking to a friend the other day and I was just telling them what I do and they were like, "But breastfeeding is best for the baby." And I said, "Yes, but sometimes not for the mom." And they were like, "What do you mean?" And I said, the mom's mental health is my priority, and what she needs to do to accomplish that is up to her. And I'm there to like support and give her like tools necessary for that. And I think people look at breastfeeding as all or nothing when you can supplement with formula and breastfeed, and the baby's going to be okay. Just make sure. I don't know. I feel so bad that the moms are just forgotten after the baby's born. Even with doctors, we have like a one postpartum checkup and like a bazillion checkups up until we have the baby. And yeah, so I think patriarchy just really makes us judge one another and say you're doing it wrong, when if we were more supportive we would be like, yeah, that's not what I would do, but I go for it, sister. But
Yeah.
um
Oh,
yeah.
no, I love that. And I think we also lose track of the idea that depressed, guilt-ridden, shame-filled postpartum mothers are not necessarily good for their babies, right?
Yeah.
Like if we're treating women with these kind of very unrealistic expectations, or that there's only one good way to be a mother, it
Mhm.
cause a mental health space that isn't necessarily good for the baby. And so the self-care of the mother and her having the information and the empowerment to make decisions that are good for her are actually what's best for the baby.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Exactly. There's this A Thoughtful Faith by Gina Colvin. She was interviewing Dr. Julie Hanks, who I feel like is a Mormon Brene Brown. She has
Mhm.
a lot of insight with motherhood, and burnout is like her big thing. But in this interview, Gina asked, "So what do mothers need?" And Dr. Hanks said, "Moms," and I think, or what do children need, not what do moms need, but she said children need moms and dads who are alive and thriving. And I think, yeah, with motherhood comes like the pressure of self-sacrificing is just so ingrained in us. But and I think people think when I say like put yourself first, it doesn't mean like neglect the baby, but it means like you matter too. It's you and the baby. It's not just like just you. It's all about the mom and whatever. And but yeah, I think it's just really important to for each mom to find a niche outside of motherhood to stay sane and take care of herself, and dads as well. But I think dads are socialized to do that anyways.
Right, more so in our culture. Exactly.
Mhm.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really important observation, is this idea of self-sacrifice and how that comes from a lot of different cultural messaging, whether it's our families, our own mothers and sisters and aunts, or our in-laws, right?
Mhm.
That can be a lot of pressure, whether it's our religions or our cultures, our communities, that all of those entities have ideas of what a good mother is and
Mhm.
can really impose a lot of pressure that is unhealthy for the system that you're talking about. So
Yeah.
yeah, really important to start off with that. So here on this interview, I think we're being very affirming that there are good choices either way. Babies thrive on formula, babies thrive on breast milk. There are lots of good ways to approach a well-balanced approach to infant feeding. Do you want to talk a little bit about maybe what you would hope is some basic, maybe educational components that would be helpful for mothers who are in this space of having to navigate infant feeding?
Like what specifically? Or
Maybe some things like, you mentioned there were things that you didn't know
oh,
or were
okay.
surprised by. Like, what are some kind of basic, if you could, pick maybe 3 to 5 things that you're like, I wish everybody
I
knew
wish
this
I would.
going into
Okay.
this, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of them.
What would those kind of basic bullet points be?
That's a good question. I guess I wish something we talked about in my training was women do feel pain and just muscle through it. It's common, but it's not normal to feel pain when you're breastfeeding. So there's a reason for the pain. And I was under the assumption that it was just normal and it would just, I just had to muscle through it. I wish and usually the pain is because of the latch, but it could be another issue. But 80% of the time, the baby's not latching properly. And that could be a number of reasons as well. But I wish I would have known that. And I think women, I know you've probably heard of the man cold, but we do muscle through colds and everything, and generally. And yeah, I think that's sad. And another thing, I guess I wish I would have known that my sexual desire would change while I was breastfeeding.
Mhm.
I didn't, I thought I was broken when I started breastfeeding. In my partnership, I was like the high sexual desire in the relationship. And yeah, I thought my baby broke me and I thought I'd never get it back. And so that was really difficult to just mourn that sexual desire and not knowing if it would ever come back or what happened. And yeah, just not feeling as connected to your partner was really difficult. So yeah, I like to normalize that with people. And I think it is hard to ask for help. So I wish I would have had like a postpartum plan, like someone that would say, Sarah, after you have your baby, like we're going to be on your team. And I could just like, I don't know, a specific postpartum plan where if I'm feeling depressed, this is what we need to do. Or if I'm feeling suicidal or want to hurt the baby, this is what we need to do. Or if can I have a scheduled like break from the baby? And this is kind of like a plan in action, like you would like a birth plan or a plan when you're like getting married. Like, but I wish there was like a specific plan after I had the baby.
Yeah. Yeah, the aftercare that you're talking about is really lacking. Like you said, you mentioned
Yeah.
like I remember being asked once, how's your mood?
How's your
You
mood?
yeah, like kind of like that one screening question to make sure I wasn't depressed postpartum, which I was. Anyway, and even then, I was like, fine. Nobody really kind of dug into that, and I was a mental health professional at the time myself, but that
Mhm.
doesn't mean that I was very self-aware, in my own ability to assess myself, and
Yeah.
I thought the screening process was pretty lame.
Yeah, and yeah, to have yeah, many women don't know that they're experiencing postpartum depression. So to have someone on the lookout beforehand before you have the baby to just like keep an eye out for that. But
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, and I think I think missing the interaction with just adults was really hard because I had just finished working and finished school and went right into a new place. We moved when I was like 8 months pregnant. And so being in a new place without work and school all of a sudden is And I think no matter where you're living, even if you don't move, it's just pretty isolating if you don't have, I guess maybe not for an introvert, but I don't know, if you don't have like human beings around that are usually there. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. So you were going through a time where you lost a big part of your community that you were used to, and that was
Mm-hmm.
an added stressor to your particular situation. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Which can happen quite often. I mean, a lot of times people who, especially with first babies, are in kind of those spaces of their mid to late 20s where there are shifts in career, there are shifts in job placement, there's even in roles, gender roles, sometimes whether or not I'm going to stay home with the kid or continue working, or whether or not I even have that option, are all things that can either complicate or take away the community that you were used to, right? So if you're
Mm-hmm.
used to working, even if you don't move, if you're used to a work life and a work community where you have friends or people you talk to every day, and then all of a sudden you decide I'm going to stay home, or either indefinitely and or even temporarily, even if it's just like a 3-week or 6-month break from work, that changes your
Mm-hmm.
community that you're used to on a regular basis. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So, given that those are some of the things that you mentioned, I'd like to, spend maybe a little bit of time on any advice you have in regards to the first bullet point. So, if there's pain, if there's discomfort, if there's maybe concern about whether or not I should even continue to breastfeed, or why am I doing this, and when is it healthy to push through or not push through, and what do we even mean by pushing through? What
Mm-hmm.
are like what maybe help us think through some of those decisions and maybe information, and then I'd like to move more towards the second piece, which I think is super important, which is the sexuality aspect and the sex drive, and what you can help inform us on that aspect as well.
Sure. Yeah, I was fortunate to be a part of the Women, Infant, Children program, or WIC, and they would frequent check-ins, and that generally for low resourced families, but I think it's like that would be beneficial for anyone if there was something more in place like that for all moms of any class. But they would do like and lactation consultants do this, like a weight check before and after you're breastfeeding the baby to know if like they're getting enough. But yeah, if there's like cracked and bleeding nipples, that means the baby is actually only sucking on your nipple, and that's not how the milk comes out. It's actually a big chunk of your breast tissue, and the nipple's just kind of hanging out. It's not supposed to be sucked on. And so that's where the nipple gets really raw. And so having a lactation counselor assessing you breastfeeding is very beneficial to know where the pain's coming from. So yeah, if it's extremely painful, I think women do stop breastfeeding because of that, which is valid. But I know if there was more like easier access to help, they could, if they wanted to, continue to breastfeed. And if your breasts feel like too heavy boulders and are just like really shiny and orange, that can be mastitis, which means there's like an infection because of a clogged milk duct. And sometimes that happens when you skip breastfeeding sessions or you wear really tight clothing. So your breastfeeding schedule is a little more sporadic and more milk is being produced than what's being taken out of your body. But that can be a little more dangerous, and you need to like see a doctor and have them look at it and put you on antibiotics. And usually also the mom will have a fever, and that's a good sign to go see your doctor. Those are the two most common reasons why women are in pain is the mastitis and the improper latch. And sometimes that can also be a tongue tie or a lip tie, and the baby just cannot open their mouth wide enough to get a good suckle and a good latch. So that's not always looked at the hospital. And I think in the hospital, we're often on meds, so we don't feel the pain until after we go home. And so, depending on your hospital, that some hospitals are better than others at like assessing that and catching that before you go home.
Mm-hmm.
But those are the main things that come to mind.
Oh, that's very
And
useful. And as you're talking about those, of course, my mind goes to kind of psychological aspects of what you're clinically talking about. And I can imagine, I don't know if you have thoughts on this, but if your child, isn't getting the nutrition it needs, like let's say they weigh the child and it's not, getting the amount of nutrition it needs. I imagine that a lot of women can feel like failures, like my body isn't working right. I can't even feed my own baby. What's wrong with
mm,
me? You had mentioned yourself kind of feeling broken and for maybe other reasons, but this
mhm,
idea that somehow if our body doesn't do what we expect it to do, then we can be really hard on ourselves in the sense of feeling like there's something unnatural or broken or bad about us. Is that fair?
mhm. Yeah, that is a common feeling. I didn't personally experience that, even though I had awful milk supply. I wasn't the best milk maker, uh, but uh, but yeah, that is a common thing, and it is sad because there's lots of things that I don't know. All our bodies are different, and unfortunately, up until recently, like men have been doing most of the research, and that's unless they're a father, breastfeeding in general has been like a big blind spot. So there's not like as much research as we would like because of the representation in researchers.
Ah,
And
right. Mm-hmm.
so
Mm-hmm.
that was something that came up in the training was, yeah, we don't know a lot about that. We don't know a lot about that. And so there's a lot of catching up to do. And but yeah, it is frustrating because I think there's just, before you're a mom, there's so much bliss and it's so romanticized. And when you become a mom, it's really difficult and it's the worst beautiful thing. It's just a huge paradox to be a parent, but yeah. So it is sad. There was this cute lactation counselor that helped my sister, and she said, "You're beautiful no matter what. No matter how much milk you make or don't make, you're just beautiful." And I just thought that was so great of her to just be validating, like, you're gorgeous no matter how much milk you make.
I
Because
love that.
yeah, I
Yeah.
think in many aspects of our lives we feel like we're failing, and we're not. We just have these unrealistic expectations of that society has placed on us as moms, and so it's
And
really
oftentimes you can get a lot of folklore. Like you say, we don't sometimes know why some people are quote unquote better milk makers than others.
mhm,
But again, there's a lot of like kind of worth put into that or blame, so like you should relax or you should eat different or you should do this or you should, so again, you can get well-meaning and yet
yeah,
maybe misinformation or myth or folklore from, your surrounding circles that can make you feel really, again, inept or inadequate or that you're doing something wrong.
mhm, yeah,
Yeah, really sad. The other thing that I was thinking as you were talking about, wearing tight clothing and things like that, is the pressure for women to very quickly get back to their pre-pregnant body look,
mhm,
right? So this
yeah,
idea that, within 10 to 12 weeks, you should be able to get back into your pair of pants or your, things that are just so unrealistic and so harmful to the healing process of the body. I heard somewhere once that it can take up to 2 years postpartum
mhm,
for your body to kind of just get back to any kind of semblance of normal. And even a lot of times it's a new normal because your hips
mhm,
can shift and I know my feet are no longer what they used to be and will never be what they used to be.
mhm,
Just from the swelling I had with one of my kiddos regarding preeclampsia and things like that. So it's just very unrealistic, this kind of fetish that we have in our society to be a certain size and to look a certain way, and the distress that can come with that when you're trying to, on the one hand, you know produce milk and feed your baby and heal, but on the other hand be a still some type of a sexy, good looking cute object.
yeah.
And
Yeah, it's hard. Yeah, recent insight that I had, a lot of women like come to me and like say I want to lose weight or just share their difficulties with body image and losing weight. And like one side of me, like the feminist, more invalidating side as well, maybe toxic positivity was just like, oh, all bodies are beautiful, like please stop talking about your weight in front of me. But the other side is like society, well, I do have skinny privilege, and society is not kind to women and even men, just the body in general, how we should look one way, and doesn't value all body sizes. So of course we're all struggling with that and having a hard time with that. So I think it's, yeah, important to just let people feel those feelings instead of tell them how sexy and beautiful they are, even though they are. But yeah,
Yeah,
it's
it's
tough.
a really big conundrum, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
it makes sense why people are having those kinds of issues, feeling that
Yeah.
pressure, acting in ways that in some ways may not help them, but in other ways does help them. You know, it's just very complex. Mhm.
Yeah. And I feel like for whatever reason, society will view single, well, not sing, but fathers as like sexy. But when you become a mom, it's not sexy, which is weird and dumb. But yeah, we're just trying to like survive. But yeah, it is difficult because, yeah, our bodies, our hair, our bodies are just so different. And we just don't, it's us getting to know like a whole new body. And it's so disorienting. Yeah. So.
Well, I love your very clinical professional assessment on that. Weird and dumb. I love it. I agree.
Yes, to be perfectly, yeah.
Right. Yeah, well, so maybe that's a good kind of bridge, because body image obviously also affects our sense of sexuality. And like you're bringing up, I think there is a semblance of that kind of messaging that we've had for female bodies, kind of the Madonna whore complex, right? You're either a sensual seductress, kind of like sexy entity that, is on the one hand revered and objectified and yet also very much shamed and put down, right?
Mm,
So like
yeah.
there's something dangerous and awful about being a sensual woman
Mhm.
who's gonna, take down mankind, Pandora's box and all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
Anyway, or you are this, kind of virginal, pure, one of the most esteemed mothers, in religious context is, the Virgin Mary, so
Mhm.
we're not even addressing sexuality with her becoming a mother, so there's kind of the sense that those two things, the purity and the worthiness and the beauty of being a mother and the sensuality of being a lover are just not very married in our cultural context. And
Yeah,
yet,
it's
isn't that so
confusing.
mind blowing when you need to have sex to have a baby? Usually,
Yeah, right?
usually, unless you've got some technological things like in vitro or things like that.
Mhm.
But
Yeah, I once saw a blog post about modesty. I think it just said, "Look cute, but not too cute."
too cute, not too cute, right?
It's just like so many mixed messages. It's like, wait, what?
Mhm.
But yeah, someone I really like is Esther Perel. She's a leading researcher on eroticism. She talks about motherhood and sexuality and just talks about, yeah, it's really hard to navigate feeling sexy as a mom, but also just the she said some things that are like essential for sexual desire are freedom and independence, and moms lose that. And so it can be really tricky to navigate. And so she just talks about like getting to know your erotic self and separating it from motherhood, and yeah, finding yourself again is a hard but necessary journey. But yeah, I think yeah, it's just a different experience for women when they become moms and navigating that.
Yeah, no, I would totally second that. I love Esther Perel's work, and there
Mm-hmm.
is this kind of constant conundrum and paradox, right, between certain things in our lives and other things in our lives, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
for example, you bringing up that we need freedom and independence and mystery and all these kinds of things to elicit passion and eroticism. Those are not necessarily very well partnered things that are happening when you're trying to take care of a new baby, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not to
Mm-hmm.
mention just pure exhaustion. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that
Yeah,
I feel super sexy when I'm sleep deprived, right? And so,
nobody does. Yeah, and I think it does the care of the child can fall more on the woman at men more often than not. Yeah, I mean, even scar tissue, if you've had a episiotomy, that can lower your sex desire. And non-breastfeeding moms, I know there was a study recently by Hallie Zimmerman and Anderson and a few other, or Anders and a few other people. But yeah, they said non-breastfeeding moms are more sexually satisfied sooner than breastfeeding moms. And yeah, there's so many, it's complicated and there's so many factors. And I think we are trying to get back to normal as quickly as possible, but yeah, it's not a quick fix, and it's just there's a lot of factors, whether it is breastfeeding or scar tissue or being touched out, and yeah, prioritizing the care of your baby or just being scared that you'll get pregnant again. So yeah, there's a huge mental load with moms after they have a baby when it comes to sexuality or sex, not just like or sex desire. So yeah.
yeah, and I know what you mean by touched out, but can you explain that a little bit to the audience? What do you mean by touched out?
Sure. Yeah, you're forming this connection with a baby, and if you are breastfeeding, they're on your breasts usually every 3 hours. And so yeah, moms may not want anyone to touch them, and you just feel like you're sharing your body with everyone but yourself, and you just feel like, and that's with one child, but many moms have more than one child. And so yeah, you can feel physically like you don't want anyone to touch you, or even mentally like you just want quietness and peace. And so yeah, there's a lot like mentally, emotionally, and physically going on where you're just like, I just want to be in a closet alone and just for like 5 minutes where I don't have to make a decision about anyone else, where I can just don't have to think about anyone else. And so yeah, there's a lot on the shoulders of a parent, and especially a mom. So
Yeah,
yeah, you don't want anyone to touch you, and I think that's fair. And yeah.
you're bringing up a very illicit memory of mine. I remember.
Sorry.
Yeah, I probably am always TMI, but you'll just have to bear with me. But I was like naked in my bed, and I was like, oh, and I was like, and I've got one kid on my boob, and I've got a toddler who's like, mommy, mommy, and earlier that morning, my spouse had wanted to, get frisky, and I was like, all I'm good for is my boobs. Like, just cry. I'm definitely having a little bitty mental breakdown. and I
Yeah.
remember that. I mean, I can laugh about it now, but in the moment it was not funny. I was not finding humor in that moment of yes, feeling like I was just an object that all these people needed. and I'm one that, and to your point, I mean, I'm glad you brought up the vulnerability of you having this sexual desire. Women oftentimes have a complicated relationship with their sexuality even prior to having a baby. How
Mm-hmm.
they go into having a baby with their sense of sexual identity and sexual kind of confidence, or knowing who they are sexually can also be part of these things. But I was fairly happy in my sexuality. I was pretty confident. I liked sex. I enjoyed bodily contact. I enjoyed being touched. So to be in this space where I'm like, well, it was just like, kind of like you, like, who am I? Am I broken? Am I ever going to get this back? Is that part of my life over? How am I going to get it back? Even if it's possible to get it back, were all things that nobody was talking to me about. I wasn't a sex therapist at the time. I didn't know anything about those kinds of things. So do you want to talk a little bit about, kind of moving into spaces of what kind of thoughts or guidance can we offer women who are having those frustrations, those fears? What are some suggestions?
Sure. Not that I'm an expert. I've only had one child, but I think letting them feel whatever they're feeling. And I wish I would have, this has been like a recent thing that I've talked to a friend about, but I wish I would have, I guess sometimes I envy, sometimes maybe this isn't true, but I feel like men maybe talk more about their sexuality among their bros. Maybe this is way off. But I wish I would have talked about my body more with like girlfriends and just like, and I haven't done that until like these past few years. And yeah, just like, especially people who have similar backgrounds as I do, it's just like, so there's so much solidarity where I'm like, okay, because you feel so insecure. And yeah, you're like, okay, it's not just me. And oh, like so and so, like, yeah, you can go on that journey together and be like, I feel you, girl. And I think that's just so powerful and meaningful. Now I forgot what your question
No,
was.
yeah, no, I
I'm
think
just rambling.
no, I think so. What I'm hearing from you through several parts of our interviews so far, I mean, one thing that I'm hearing from you is education is really powerful,
Oh, for sure.
right? So knowing these things, going into understanding that, oh, I may notice, my sexual drive shift or change. And I'm pretty sure the research does show that throughout pregnancy, there's more variety of sexual drive. Some people can get really super horny and get super excited about their body and love their glow and my
You get
boobs
a
are
lot of
bigger.
attention too.
you know
Yeah.
they can get super sexy during pregnancy. Others not so
Or
much.
not. Yeah.
Yeah, others not so. Others are like, I feel bloated and big and I
I'm a
hate my
hideous
body.
monster. Yeah.
And hormonally, hormones affect people differently. So even though we're all kind of going through a similar journey, that doesn't mean that we all have the same hormonal response to how, estrogen is affecting all these things. Anyway, but with breastfeeding, I think, there's a general consensus that it's for most people, it does lower sexual drive. It's not
Yeah,
necessarily.
the hormones specifically needed to breastfeed a baby will lower your sexual drive.
Right. And if you think about that
Prolactin is up in the estrogen. Yeah.
from
So
a from a evolutionary theory perspective, that kind of makes sense, right? Like your body doesn't
yeah,
want to create a new child while it's trying to feed this new, this other child. And
sure.
so I think that there's something there that makes kind of common sense. So knowing that, not being so shocked or fearful about it, that your partner knows that, right? So a lot of times
Yeah.
men are not educated at all either in what to expect from their wives, or it's been 3 months since you had the baby, why aren't we back to normal, right? Or like there's a lot of education that can happen for both the partner and not even just in heterosexual couples. If you're have a lesbian sexual partner or things like that, there can still be a lot of misinformation that can be harmful because you're trying to make sense of, and then of course you're in danger of making up stories, right? Well, this must mean
Yeah.
you no longer love me, or the kid is more important than me, or when really it's usually it has nothing to do with those kinds of things. It has to do with our
Yeah.
bodies and our healing and things like that. So I think education is something that I've heard from you a lot today.
For sure. And even if two gay men adopt a baby, I'm sure there's, even though they're not breastfeeding, I'm sure there's that navigating having an infant and prioritizing the infant will also naturally and obviously take away from sexy time. And so,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, but
There's
education is key. Can
doctor.
I show off a book?
Oh, I'd love you to. Yeah.
You've probably heard of her, Emily
Oh,
Nagoski.
yes,
Come
for
as you are.
sure. Yes.
Yeah, this was good and validating to read after I had a baby. Just like, oh, like what I'm going through is normal, even though I didn't know beforehand. But yeah, like I'm okay. I'm not broken and it's normal. And yeah, I think, yeah, everyone, hopefully you have a partner who's curious and supportive and understanding. I think generally most partners are. And so I think, yeah, learning together about each other's bodies and each other's sexuality and just normalizing the, yeah, things are hard right now and I just need your help. And so,
Yeah, right. No, I agree that. No, I love Emily Nagoski's work. She's very pivotal. I've done an interview with her as well, and that will be on
oh,
people's podcast as well. So yeah,
cool.
I think too, the other thing that I hear you saying a lot is normalizing, normalizing, right? Like it's okay to have your feelings. It's okay to kind of have these frustrations. It's okay to kind of be where you're at, if you want
Mm-hmm.
to really prioritize breastfeeding, or if you want to find a way to supplement breastfeeding, or if, like it's so normalizing that it's okay to be kind of a mess for a minute. It's okay
Mm-hmm.
to take different approaches to whatever issues I'm feeling, and kind of feel the feels, let the feelings be. So I've heard that from you several times today as well.
Yeah. And then in any situation, then you don't feel alone and you don't keep all of that pent or suppressed inside. And yeah, it it's just very liberating to just be real with people and be real with someone who can sit with you in your feelings and not like freak out and try to fix you or judge you. And yeah, it's the most incredible feeling, and you probably know as like a therapist with clients. But yeah, that relationship just normalizing is, yeah, helps you feel less alone. So important.
Yeah. So 3, which you go right into, is community support, whether that's through somebody like you that's professionally prepared to offer some, good advice and some guidelines, whether it's through friends, family, people who can understand you and get you and support your needs. So community is
Mm-hmm.
part of it.
Yeah, one mom that I really look up to, she has 3 children, and yeah, knowing that she's been there and she's further down the road was really empowering. And just having a role model, someone you trust, and someone who's supportive is beautiful, I think, for dads and moms. So,
Yeah, no, that's great. My last thought would be, okay, so if you've educated yourself, if you've normalized kind of your situation and framed it in a more positive perspective and realistic perspective and a grace giving perspective, you've reached out to people, you've got a good community group. I say the last part is, at some point, it's good to be kind of intentionally minded. Like, okay, maybe these things aren't going to happen naturally. I'm going to have to maybe put some effort. And where do I want to put that effort in? Whether it's, contacting a lactation specialist, whether it's coming up with a new plan. Maybe I have to change my plan. I thought I would breastfeed for a year. I've run into some hurdles where maybe that's no longer the case. Or I thought I wouldn't breastfeed for very long, and I ended up really liking it and actually having a positive experience. I want to try to go further than I thought I would. So kind of, I think you started off with one of your suggestions of having kind of a postpartum plan that goes for a year or two, where you have like intentional movements towards decisions and actions that you can take. And I think when it comes to sexuality in particular, again, the research shows that, there's hope here. I think it's like about 70%, maybe 80. It's a pretty high number. I'm pulling it out of my head, so I don't know exactly, of couples, so partnered partners or married partners, report that their sex life kind of gets back on track, within a year or two after having a baby. So that's pretty hopeful.
yeah.
That still leaves a large amount of people, 20 to 30% is still a lot of people, where the situation is really that having a baby kind of derails their sex life kind of in a way that is not that is more, has a longer track record. And so I think that if you're in that camp, taking some intentional approaches to hopefully getting, your sex life back on track, whether that's through seeing a sex therapist or reading a book like Come As You Are, or talking to your friends about what's been helpful for them, being intentional about not just ignoring the problem that is potentially going to cause, a lot more problems down the road.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's such an easy thing to put on the back burner because parents have a bazillion other things they can focus on and need to focus on. So yeah, you have to be very intentional about that and want it as well, and want it enough to put the time to figure that out. So yeah, that's a good point.
Is there anything that was particularly helpful for you as you went from this space of like feeling like, oh my goodness, I'm broken, and am I ever going to get my sex drive back, to maybe where you're at today? Has there been anything helpful for you?
Yeah, having a partner who is super supportive with like pacing and everything. I think there are some media like that portray it in an accurate and empowering light, like the show Working Moms or Jane the Virgin. So that I know this is my world is full of TV. So I do I think TV helps normalize things as well. So that was helpful. Giving myself permission to wear sexy clothes and to read things that aroused me. Yeah, there's a lot of shame associated with that. And so that's helped. And I think, just getting to know my body again, separate from my partner, was really helpful to figure out what turns me on, and kind of get to know myself again. And I know not everyone has like the time or resources to do that, but I think it's, growing up the way I did, it was harder to give myself permission to be a sexual being. And so having, I guess, a partner that didn't shame me for that and judge me for that. I wore a bikini for the first time at the beach this summer, and just like small little steps, just giving myself permission to get to know my body. And I can't think of like anything specific, but little things like that helped.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And that's an interesting interplay, right? Between whenever I think about things that make me feel attractive or sexy, they are often also things that I get a little grumpy about from my feminist perspective, right? Like, I shouldn't have to wear lipstick and mascara to be considered beautiful, right? But then I put on lipstick and mascara for me, and it makes me feel more beautiful, right? So it's kind of
Get it, Natasha. Get
right?
it.
And I think that there's an acceptance there, where we can understand that some of these things are culturally imposed upon us. And at the same time, if they help us to wear a bikini or to wear, a nightgown that makes you feel sensual, or instead of seeing that all as like objectifying and I shouldn't buy into that. No, there's some value there. I'm not going to be able to escape all of my cultural conditioning. I'm not going to be able to completely live outside of these, kind of critiques that are valid, and yet they still are things we have to live with. So I always, when women are like, oh, well, I want to feel sexy by doing this, but does that mean I'm just lame and giving into, patriarchy per se? I'm like, well, can we look at it from a more, kind of realistic space? Does it help you feel better? Do you feel sexy? Do you feel sensual? Own it, have fun with it, go with it. And for you, that was a bikini, right? And for another person, it might be something else. And that's great. That's awesome.
Yeah. And we don't often give ourselves that permission. And I think when I started doing things for me and not my partner is when I got to know myself and feel more sexy. And yeah, just like it was just for me. So yeah, there's a lot of directions you could go to like get there and feel more sexy, but I think also just scheduling alone time or girlfriend time is also very beneficial. Having girl talk and just talking about your bodies and what feels good and what's normal or what their experience has been is fun too.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
There's power in group story, right? Like sharing and knowing you're not alone and being open to
mhm.
somebody else's experience and learning from each other. Those are really powerful social components of any
Yeah.
journey.
And even if you don't have a friend who you're comfortable doing that with, you could do it with a therapist, talk to your therapist about that. And yeah, I think it's important. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, I really appreciate your time. A question I oftentimes end with, because I get in my own ideas of where the interview goes, but maybe you had something you were hoping to share that I haven't asked about or haven't focused on. Is there anything that I'm missing that you'd like to make sure that we fit in here?
I can't think of anything, but
Okay.
thanks for
Yeah.
asking.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes people are like, no, we covered everything. And other times it's like, oh, I'm so glad you asked because, yeah, you missed this whole.
Yeah, there's a lot of things, but yeah, I think we covered a good chunk.
Good, good. All right. Well, good. The last thought I have, just which is kind of funny. I mean, I'll just put it out there. I think breast milk in general is an interesting thing to consider in a sex life, right? So sometimes a partner really enjoys kind of seeing what that's about and even tasting the breast milk, and other people are completely like off put by that and think that's really weird and strange. Again, some women find their ability to kind of create this fluid and stuff very sensual, and other women are like, I'm kind of just I really want to separate those two things. And it's
Mhm.
hard because obviously our breasts are very much sexualized in our culture, and they have some sexual, I guess, like they have some sexual function in the sense that they're pleasure. A lot of people enjoy nipple or breast stimulation as part of a
Mhm.
sexual kind of play. So that's an interesting, kind of space where people sometimes don't know how to talk about or are awkward or feel like
Yeah.
taboo topic in regards to their sex life when there's milk involved.
Yeah, as long as the mom's okay with it, go for it.
Yeah.
Could be fun. Yeah, it is interesting because helping moms like get their or their breast milk supply higher, I'm essentially telling them to like tug on their nipples, visualize something relaxing. It does when I'm talking to them, it does sound like I'm telling them to masturbate and yeah, it's the nipples and the breasts are yeah, they have multiple functions. So I think as long as the mom is like cool with it or yeah, it depends on how the mom's feeling. And I think some moms are like, yeah, this is fun. And I think the partners are also the non-milk making partner is also just like very interested and in awe of the milk making process and the body. And we women are as well, but it's from the outside looking in is like really interesting to like watch that. So
Yeah. Yes, that's a
but
whole nother thing. We just
there
want to
there
normalize,
is a
throw
scene
out
about that, Natasha, on Working Moms.
there. Is there?
So you gotta watch it.
I don't know.
It's
I think I've
funny.
watched the first season of that. I'm gonna have to keep going.
It's season 2, so you will have to keep going.
That's awesome,
It
right?
is a funny thing, yeah. But
Yeah, and
yeah,
mainly I just want to throw out
own
there
it.
it's okay either way, right? Like it's okay to
Mhm.
think that's fun and playful and cool and even sexy, and it's okay to not have that be part of your erotic template.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
good
I
deal.
think, yeah, don't feel. either way, I think women could feel shame about it. Like, oh, I'm so weird. I'm like turned on by this, or oh, I should be turned on by this. They're my boobs. But yeah, either way, as long as yeah, just own it. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. Well, thank you, Sarah, so much for your time.
Of course.
I'll and include all the links to your particular practice and your resources, as well as some of the things that you've mentioned today that are good adjunct resources for people to be thinking about. So thank you so much. And I hope that you have a good rest of your weekend and that you continue to enjoy your little one and your journey as you help people in this area that's so important as part of our life cycle. So
of course. Thank you.
All right. Take care.
You too. Bye.
There is a place where time slows to nature's pace, and there is space there to find yourself in her embrace. Some places should be left alone. Now tishki say the now, so we can always go to the homeland of the heart. Of our human history etched on her canyon walls, alongside Earth's mysteries. Some places should be left alone. Now tishki say the novel, so we can to the homeland of the heart, to the homeland of the heart. Deep in our cities, we sleep without her stars, yet still her presence sustains us from afar. Some places should be left alone. Now tishki say the novel, so we can always go to the homeland of the heart, to the homeland of the heart, to the homeland